Imagine that one day, poof, all the big, furry, and feathered creatures just vanish into thin air. Humans disappear as well, and now there's nothing left but microbes. What would happen to Earth? How long would it take for complex creatures to appear again? And what would they be like? Alright, welcome to the microbial world. Microbes are the tiniest building blocks of life, so small you can't even see them without a microscope. In this amazing world, there are three main groups of microbes: bacteria, archaea, and the single-celled organisms. Bacteria are everywhere, from the air you breathe to the food you eat. Some bacteria are good buddies, helping us digest our food, and even making yogurt taste yummy. But some of them can be mischievous and cause infections. Archaea are the tough explorers of our microscopic universe. Archaea are the daredevils of microbes, and they showed us that life can survive in the craziest conditions. For example, they can thrive in super hot springs, even in incredibly scorching temperatures. Some of them are even capable of living in volcanoes. They also feel pretty fine in the freezing cold. Certain bacteria can get busy even in icy places like the Arctic and Antarctica. There, they help break down things like old plants and animals that got frozen in time. They work as nature's cleanup crew, turning leftovers into useful bits. Or imagine the darkest depths of the ocean where sunlight can't reach. And who do we meet down there? Microbes again, who make food from all the weird chemicals in the water. And of course, they also live inside you. You're a walking microbe party. Your gut alone is a cozy home to trillions of bacteria that help you digest food and stay healthy. And finally, the single-celled organisms. They can be plant-like, making their own food through photosynthesis, or animal-like, hunting for their next tiny meal. Some single-celled organisms can even team up to form colonies that work together and build complex structures. All these microbes are the foundation of life. At first, there were nothing but microbes on Earth. They were just hanging out and enjoying the simple life. But time kept ticking, and the more years passed, the more they evolved. They changed a little, sometimes acquiring some special abilities and passing these abilities on to their children. Generations come and go, and those changes keep adding up. Microbes became more and more complex. And after billions of years and trillions of changes, they become something as amazing as the animals, plants, and people we see on Earth today. It was a very long and tedious process, so let's try to repeat it now. Like, what if all living organisms on our modern Earth, except for the first microbes, would disappear? Without the hustle and bustle of life, the world would become eerily quiet. Streets that were once filled with people and animals would now be empty and peaceful. Buildings and cities would stand alone like silent monuments to the vanished world. First, we would have a huge disruption of food chains. Without plants, herbivores, and carnivores, the intricate food chains and webs that sustain life would simply collapse. Our world wouldn't be as wild and vibrant. The tiny microbes are cool, but they can't recreate the same big, bustling party that we all love. Also, remember how we mentioned that microbes often eat the leftovers of animals and other organisms? Just like when you eat cake and turn it into energy, they turn these bits into nutrients that the Earth loves. But now, without the big animals and plants, there wouldn't be as much leftover cake. The microbes would still work hard, but their evolution would be really slowed down. Now, you might think that without plants, we wouldn't have any more oxygen. But this isn't entirely true. In fact, trees produce only about 20 to 30% of the oxygen on Earth. So who really helps us breathe? Plankton from SpongeBob. But seriously, ocean plankton, especially phytoplankton, which is responsible for around 80% of Earth's oxygen production. Phytoplankton are considered microorganisms. They're tiny, single-celled or colonial organisms that float around in the oceans, harnessing sunlight. So, if all land plants and animals disappeared, oceanic plankton would still continue to produce oxygen in the oceans through photosynthesis. They would become even more essential for maintaining a breathable atmosphere. Although now these guys would face some big challenges. You see, big animals like whales and fish usually provide nutrients to the ocean. These nutrients are plant food that phytoplankton need to grow and thrive. Without the big animals, there might be fewer of these special nutrients around. The phytoplankton might not grow as well. And since these guys act as the bottom of the ocean food chain, that could have a domino effect on the whole ocean food web. And also, with fewer plants, there's less oxygen being made, and carbon dioxide starts to stick around more. The balance of gases in the air would change a bit, and when the balance tips, it can affect the weather. The Earth's temperature and the way wind moves would change too. Plus, too much carbon dioxide can make the air feel a bit stuffy. Next, animals like moles, ants, and worms as nature's engineers. They're digging tunnels, burrows, and homes in the ground. When these animals dig and move around, they're actually helping the soil. They mix it up and create pathways for air and water to travel through. It's like they're giving the soil a good shake to keep it healthy. So without the animal engineers, the soil might get a bit packed and tight. Water from rain wouldn't be able to seep in as easily. When they're gone, the nutrients aren't getting spread around as much, and the soil might miss its tasty treats. So the whole ecosystem underground could become less cozy and more cramped. But the most interesting question is, what would happen to all our human artifacts? People disappeared, but their builds remained. Let's look at how this could affect the development of microbes on Earth. Our human-made things need proper care. So, if there were no more people around, all these things would be destroyed very fast. Microbes can grow on surfaces, and over time, they would start to cover buildings, streets, and structures. It might not be visible right away, but given enough time, you'd see a thin layer of microbial growth. Nature is a powerful thing. Buildings that were once shielded by human maintenance would now be exposed to the elements. Wind, rain, sun, and snow would all destroy and break down everything we've ever created. And some places on Earth have really tough weather, super hot summers, freezing winters, or crazy storms. In these areas, buildings and cities might even get sadder faster. Microbes would contribute to this too, as some of them produce acids that can break down materials. Slowly, cracks might appear, and materials like concrete and wood might weaken. Humans overestimate their power when they call themselves kings of nature. If we disappeared, in just a couple of thousand years, there would be almost no traces of human civilization left. It would be like we never even existed. But in any case, this event would offer an exciting opportunity for microbes to evolve in a completely new way. With the spotlight all to themselves, they're free to explore and adapt to their surroundings. Some places might become more challenging, while others might become easier to conquer. Microbes reproduce quickly, sometimes in just a matter of minutes. This rapid evolution could lead to a burst of new microbial species. Could microbes rehabitate the planet? Absolutely. Over time, new species of animals and plants would begin to appear. Like the butterfly effect, any small changes would have led to completely new types of life, and perhaps to new types of humans. In any case, these rapidly evolving microbes could reshape the way ecosystems work. They'd interact with each other in new ways, creating intricate relationships and cycles. The balance of life on Earth might be very different from what we know today. What would it look like? Let's leave that to your imagination. These weird-looking blobs are not just some random jelly balls in the ocean. Those are some of the biggest organisms with just one cell you'll find on Earth. And they pop if you squeeze them. We're looking at a specific type of algae that can be as small as a pinhead and as big as an eyeball. Or better yet, sailor's eyeball, as they're usually called. How large it's going to be depends on what's in its vacuole, which is the space inside of its cell wall. This organism is made of just one cell, but it can have more than one nucleus. It's like it has many control centers in just one cell. This happens because these organisms are zoonocytic, which means they're made up of a bunch of nuclei that don't have walls that would separate them. These are not some mythical creatures hidden at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Divers around the world who like to explore coral reefs can stumble upon them. These algae come in different colors, such as black, bright green, or silvery. Their color depends on how their cell walls are set. In some cases, researchers stumbled upon a shiny orb on the seafloor that looked like a golden egg. The interesting thing is that the egg had a hole in it. So the question was if something had tried to get out or into this orb. Hopefully, it was just a jelly blob minding its own business. Normally, cells don't grow this big. It would mess up their balance. If something's too big, the ratio of surface area to volume won't be optimal anymore. But sailors' eyeballs have their own trick to end up this large. There are different parts inside them, and each has its own chloroplasts and nucleus. If you were to pop one of these jelly blobs, it wouldn't just burst like a balloon. Instead, it would probably pop up because they only need one nucleus for a whole new eyeball to grow. All this means is it would be hard to have them in aquariums, but they can at least live peacefully in the ocean, hoping no one will pop them. Now the question is, if a one-cell thing can grow to be this big, how large can real living beings get? The biggest animal that has ever walked on our planet was probably a dinosaur called Argentinosaurus, a giant that lived around 90 million years ago. We can compare it to the heaviest land creature we have today, the African elephant. It weighs less than 7 tons. Gigantic for us, it would look like a bug next to the Argentinosaurus, which weighed around 77 tons. They both look small next to the blue whale though, with a weight of 165 tons. That's probably the heaviest animal that has ever lived on Earth. In theory, and according to the laws of physics, creatures that live on land can gain up to 120 tons. There's a mathematical principle that explains why animals can't grow indefinitely. It says the ratio of two volumes is greater than the ratio of their surfaces. It means that as some creature gets bigger, not all of its parts get bigger at the same rate. If the elephant gets 3 times as wide, tall, and long, its overall size will also increase. But its mass will increase way more than that. It means the volume will grow faster than the surface of the animal's body. That's why bigger animals need much larger limbs to support their weight. The problem is that limbs probably won't be strong enough to carry such an enormous weight. The only way our imaginary giant elephant could move such a heavy body is by having extremely big and thick legs, just to walk, let alone do other things. Physics is not the only element that sets size limits. Otherwise, we'd have to be very careful not to end up under giant, wide feet of 100-ton animals wandering around. Another important thing is whether there's enough food for them, because these giants certainly need a lot of it. It's not just quantity, of course. Creatures can only grow bigger when they live in productive environments with high-quality foods rich in nutrients. That probably explains why certain reptiles, such as titanosaurs, grew way bigger than, for example, the biggest mammals that roamed terrestrial areas. Warm-blooded mammals have faster metabolisms. That means they need around 10 times more food to support their body sizes than reptiles do. Reptiles not only have slower metabolisms, but they also have lower body temperatures, so they can eat less and still feel satisfied. And they'll grow big anyway, since they don't burn their calories that quickly. No wonder that the biggest dinosaurs that walked on land were 10 times larger than the biggest mammals. Now, blue whales are kinda exceptions to all these rules. They're warm-blooded mammals, but when you live in the ocean, being a giant is not a big problem. It's easier to be very large in the water because it takes away lots of stress and pressure from your bones and muscles. And that's something land animals can't avoid. That way, blue whales can swim around and look for food the whole day. They can just casually open their mouth and let zooplankton come in. So yeah, our planet has proven it can handle mega creatures because, for hundreds of millions of years, some of them walked on land, not just swam in the ocean. But in the last 20,000 years, most of them have vanished. Big land mammals such as rhinos and elephants exist only in some parts of the world, and their numbers are getting lower. There are fewer whales than before, and for these or some other giant animals to evolve that big again, humans would have to step back. We may not have gigantic dinosaurs, but some of the creatures living in today's world are still surprisingly and dangerously big, like the saltwater crocodile, the biggest reptile in the world. A male can grow up to 23 feet and weigh about 2,200 pounds. That's not the only scary thing about them. They have the second most powerful bite on the planet, right behind that of the Nile crocodile. The title of the largest bird on Earth belongs to the ostrich. It has wings, but they're too short for flying. The animal holds them outstretched when it runs, and this way it stays balanced more easily. Plus, their body is too big for flying anyway. That's why evolution had to give them some other advantage, like being able to run very fast. Don't make an ostrich upset unless you can run faster than 40 miles per hour in short sprints or at least 30 miles per hour over longer distances. In just one stride, this bird can cover up to 16 feet, which is how long a mid-sized family car is. Don't underestimate these fellas just because they're birds. They have very strong legs they use for self-defense. They can kick with a force that would take down even a lion. You wouldn't expect turtles to grow this big and to look so mean, but somehow, alligator snapping turtles still manage to surprise us. With jaws that look like beaks, spiked shells, and thick, scaled tails, they really look like the dinosaur of the turtle world, or the main enemy from Super Mario games. They love to spend their time in lakes, rivers, and canals of the southeastern United States and live for up to 100 years. They have chemosensory organs in their necks, which means they can smell using their throats. That helps a lot because their eyes aren't much of use in the murky waters where they live. Instead, they just draw water into their throat in a specific method we call gular pumping, to get samples of the water around them they want to smell.
There are entire communities of unusual tiny organisms that live in lagoons in Patagonia, and they are some of the first forms of life ever. No one had known about them until two scientists, Brian and Maria, went to explore certain areas in Patagonia. Now, Patagonia occupies nearly half of Argentina, and few people live there, only some farmers and sheep ranchers that mostly stay near rivers and grow things such as apples, pears, and alfalfa. A long time ago, it was a wild and distant place where Indian tribes lived. But this time, we're going to follow the tracks of life forms that appeared long before humans and look closer at these interesting microorganisms Brian and Maria found. Those two had to drive for 9 hours on some rough roads to reach their destination. They stayed in a small village. Only 35 people live there. These people depend on just one spring because it almost never rains there. On the last night in the village, Brian realized that satellite images he had taken had shown a set of lagoons that were only 10 miles away. The next day, the small team jumped into a car and went up the road as far as they could until it became too difficult to drive. They continued hiking the rest of the way. It was hard because they had to carry water to deal with the intense sunlight. In some spots, they ended up sinking up to their knees in a slush made of salt. Up there were 12 lagoons with perfectly clear waters. The place itself didn't offer much except for very acidic and salty water and intense direct sunlight. But it was kind of like traveling back in time, because those conditions were like what Earth looked like many, many years ago. When Brian examined the lagoons, he was surprised to see many unusual microorganisms there. We call them stromatolites, and they're so small we can't even see them without a microscope. But they get together and form large communities. In the past, many unusual species lived this way. For example, cyanobacteria. They were important back in their time because they produced oxygen. Earth, in its initial stages, didn't have much of this gas in its atmosphere. The first stromatolites might have been formed by diverse types of bacteria that didn't necessarily produce any oxygen, but were just living their peaceful life there. They formed layers, piling on top of one another, so that at least some of them could get a bit of sunlight. They used sand and sticky liquids to stay close together. Brian was also incredibly surprised because those were the biggest living stromatolites he had ever seen. Living stromatolites usually grow to be over 3.3 feet high, but the newly found ones were 15 feet wide and a few feet tall, which is giant compared to those living in other places. And fossilized ones were even larger. A long time ago, they could grow bigger than today because there weren't many other species that could eat or harm them. Also, there are many other organisms today that can grow faster and more massive than them and take up their space. That's why stromatolites can only survive in rare places where hardly anything else can live, like in these very salty lagoons located high above sea level in Punta de Atacama. The stromatolites found there are the most famous ones because they might be some of the best examples of the earliest life on our planet. But they're not actually the first form of life on Earth. The oldest of their fossils are 3.5 billion years old, while some other evidence we have tells us that life on our planet appeared around 4.1 billion years ago. Maybe some stromatolites lived back then as well. But Earth has changed a lot since then, and the places where they might have lived haven't survived. Now, all this may not seem like a lot at first glance, because no one has found an exotic and weird beast our world has never seen. But these are notable examples of what searching for life somewhere else in the universe might look like. Scientists who are interested in studying Mars often come to this place, since it might be similar to what the red planet looked like an exceptionally long time ago. If there were fossils hidden in the ancient rocks on Mars, they might look like these stromatolites. Another faraway land has revealed some of its secrets. It's Antarctica, with an ancient lost world found under its ice. Antarctica hasn't always been this frosty, isolated land of snow and ice sheets. Once it used to be part of the Gondwana supercontinent, together with what is now South America, Africa, Australia, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Indian subcontinent. But at some point, it split off and went to build a life on its own. It formed as other landmasses started to move away, which created its coastline. But Antarctica was different in many other ways back then too. It used to be a land covered in magnificent forests and rivers full of life. Scientists use radar and satellites to explore a mysterious world hidden under the ice there. This ancient land, which is close to the Indian Ocean, is as big as the U.S. state of Maryland or Belgium. It's more than 14 million years old. Some studies say that this area formed over 34 million years ago, which was way before Antarctica got into its deep freeze. At first, temperatures there were higher, possibly like the weather in Patagonia or the cold, temperate rainforests of Tasmania, New Zealand, or maybe even more tropical than that. But as the climate became cooler, small glaciers started forming on hills close to the rivers. Valleys sunk deeper because of all that ice covering them. And then, temperatures dropped even lower, and a giant layer of ice covered the entire continent, hiding those old glaciers. Rivers shaped this lost world a long time ago, way before it ended up covered in ice that's almost 2 miles thick in some spots. Scientific studies of this area showed that those landscapes had been full of highlands and mountains. The ice that formed over Antarctica made the whole area very cold, so the landscape couldn't erode anymore. This means everything has remained basically the same and untouched under the ice for millions and millions of years. What's interesting is that we know less about this land hidden under the ice than about the surface of Mars. One way to explore it would be to drill through these ice sheets to check for samples of sediments below. They could tell us more about the ancient flora and fauna frozen underneath. It's not a new method. A similar method was used to collect 2-million-year-old samples in Greenland. Australia has a secret world too. Ancient organisms were found hidden in rocks in the northern parts of the continent that are about 1.6 billion years old. These microscopic things are part of a family called eukaryotes. The members of this family that exist today include plants, fungi, animals, and even those tiny organisms with just one cell, such as amoeba. All living things with nuclei in their cells, including us, can trace their family tree back to one of the oldest members of this family. That one is called the last eukaryotic common ancestor, and it lived more than 1.2 billion years ago. Those ancient organisms were more complex and bigger than bacteria. Maybe they were the first predators on Earth, hunting bacteria. You've spent your entire life researching microorganisms. Last few years, you've been creating a device that can shrink you in size. And finally, it's ready. At first, you want to shrink yourself to the size of a thumb so you can probably see some microbes with the unaided eye. And then, after more experimenting, you hope to shrink to the size of a bacterium yourself. To make the journey safe, you put on a special suit, similar to a spacesuit. It's equipped with a life support system. You direct a beam from the device at yourself. The beam must change your mass and volume. To return to the previous state, you must stand on a round platform the size of a hockey puck. You put it near your feet so you can easily climb on it when you get smaller. Press the button and activate the machine. Ooh, something's wrong. The device gives an error and you shrink not to the size of a thumb, but 1,000 times smaller, to the size of a bacterium. Oops. You become so small that the fleece of the carpet on which you were standing seems to be the size of huge trees. Now don't panic. You need to find the puck, stand on it, and you'll return to your normal size. It was right next to your feet, just an inch away. Wait, but what's 1 inch now, when 1,000 people your size can fit on the tip of a human hair? You decide to climb the fleece to see where the puck is. You can't see the lab ceiling. The room is out of focus because of its huge size. You're surrounded by thousands of bacteria. They're so different in sizes and colors, but you can identify 3 main forms. Round bacteria that looks like spheres are cocci. They can merge with each other and increase in size. Cylindrical, capsule-shaped bacteria, looking like sausages or bananas, these are bacilli. And spirobacteria are called spirilla. At the end of their body, they have a hair-like cilium. Bacteria are essential for our planet. They help to produce oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide. They purify the water and air, digest the food inside our stomachs, and improve our immune system. They're crawling on the ground all over the carpet. You start climbing the fleece. On your way, you meet cocci that look like huge potatoes, spirilla similar to spaghetti. After a few hours, you finally reach the top of the carpet. For you, it was a long time, but in reality, just a couple of minutes have passed. The smaller you are, the slower the time's going. Do you remember how difficult it is to swat a fly? That's because it sees your movements in slow motion. So, looking around, you see an endless forest of fleece. In the distance, you can see the silhouette of a big mountain with a flat top. It seems bigger than Everest to you. Great, now you need to get there alive. Suddenly, a huge bacterium attacks you from below. It's several bacilli joined together. They look like a bunch of sausages. To escape, you jump down. You weigh so little that falling from any height is safe. You run through the dense forest. You notice that almost all bacteria are going at you. Most of them eat organic material, such as glucose or carbohydrates. And right now, hey, lucky you, you're the biggest source of carbs. Smaller microbes stick to your legs, arms, and face. You shake them off and fall. Several bacilli joined together are approaching, but then a round object with spikes, the size of a football, crashes into them. You see a lot of these balls and realize they're viruses. Microorganisms that can't live apart from bacteria. To reproduce, they must infect a living being. The viruses have entered the bacterium. Other bacteria that chased you are attacked too. You see a gigantic bacterium that looks like a passenger Boeing without wings. It's a type of cocci, several big balls attached to each other and about to eat you. You see a small prickly football getting inside its body. The bacterium shivers and freezes. After a moment, a hole appears in it, and hundreds of thousands of viruses fly out. They're everywhere and looking for a new host. Prickly balls fly towards you at high speed. You grab a piece of lint and swing it like a baseball bat. You fight off the viruses one by one. Your bat breaks and you run away. It seems that you're safe now. You're entering a huge field. There's nothing here but bacteria. You realize this is a small spot on the carpet that you accidentally burned a few months ago. There's a billion microbes here, and they're multiplying at a tremendous rate. One bacterium increases in size and splits into two. After a few minutes, these two bacteria also grow and divide. Now there are 4 of them. The colony of bacteria grows exponentially. With such rapid reproduction, a single bacterium can create offspring weighing about a ton in 24 hours. After 5 days, the bacteria will be able to fill all the seas and oceans. Fortunately, the speed with which they divide is equal to the speed of their destruction. Dryness, a ray of light, high temperature, humidity, all these phenomena control the population of microbes. Under ideal conditions, the bacteria could take over the whole world. You make your way through a field of microorganisms. Large bacteria consume small ones. They multiply and are being destroyed. It's a boiling sea of life. You feel your foot is stuck. You stepped on something sticky. Right underneath, a large spherical bacterium crawls out of the ground. It's connected with other bacteria and hasn't gotten a certain form. It looks like formless pulsing biomass. The thing is clinging to your body, wrapping you. It feels like you're being absorbed by warm jelly. The bacterium compresses your chest. It's hard to breathe and move. At this moment, something that looks like a metal screw smashes into the bacterium. A large diamond bursts in next. After that, several thin, smooth legs looking like curved needles get inside too. All these details unite and transform into a strange creature inside the microbe. A diamond is attached to one end of the screw, and the needle legs cling down. Several dozen of these break into the jelly's body. They connect together and form an army of robots. All these creatures break out from a small hole in the bacterium and tear the microbe to pieces. You escape and find yourself in chaos. The little robot with a diamond for a head is called a bacteriophage. Despite their appearance, they're created by nature, not artificially. The goal of bacteriophages is to attack and destroy bacteria from within. That's how they reproduce. These creatures are all around us everywhere and control the population of microorganisms. When bacteria multiply inside the human body, they leave waste products of decay. This waste is harmful to the body, so it has to fight. Sometimes doctors use bacteriophages, so they help to get rid of bad microbes. They don't attack anything but bacteria. And now you see hundreds of billions of bacteriophages destroying billions of bacteria. The walking diamonds jump on the bacterium, plunging their heads into it, and release the genetic code, separate parts that assemble in new bacteriophages. You continue on your way and take a few diamonds with you just in case. The road is long, but after a few weeks, you finally manage to reach the puck. In the normal flow of time, it's been an hour. You're exhausted, and there's still a whipping to the top. The puck is so high that you can't see the top of it. You can't sleep because you might wake up inside some microbe. There are still a lot of bacteriophages around, but you don't want to take any chances. A deafening crash shakes the air. It's like an airplane turbine is running right next to your ear. You're looking up. A creature the size of a city lands on the carpet from the sky. It flaps its wings and makes this noise. The wings create a hurricane. You grab the fleece to keep yourself from being blown away. The creature smells bad. One of its legs resembles a large skyscraper. You realize it's a fly. Here's your chance to get to the puck. Big orange eyes divided into thousands of segments look like 2 planets. You climb on the tip of the fly's leg. The insect takes off and you hold on tight. The carpet is moving further and further away. From up here, you can see the top of the puck. It's so wide that you can't see the round edge. You let go of the fly and fall. In the air, you run into millions of bacteria. Finally, you land on the solid puck surface. The device activates. and you return to your normal size. You are, indeed, one lucky bug. So, there's a spooky feeding habit that caterpillars in Hawaii have been showing off. These inchworms, called geometrid larvae, are going against the norm and skipping the whole eating leaves thing. Instead, they hang out on leaves and stems, waiting for insects to come by so they can quickly snatch them up with their spiny legs. Ow! Scientists have found a bunch of these little bug hunters in Hawaii's forests and have been raising them in the lab. Turns out they belong to a group of caterpillars called Eupithecia, which normally chow down on plant stuff like flowers and leaves. But in Hawaii, around 6 of these Eupithecia species have decided to go carnivorous, opting for a diet of insect snacks instead. Maybe all that protein-rich flower pollen they've been eating has helped them unlock their inner predator. Due to the lack of predators from the mainland, these grappling inchworms have been able to thrive in Hawaii's ecosystem, unlike other invasive species causing trouble for native plants and animals. These flesh-eating caterpillars in Hawaii have evolved to occupy the ecological niche typically filled by insects like praying mantises in other regions. They're known for their quick attacks, taking only about 0.1 second to strike and devour their live prey. Hopefully, they don't get any bigger and hungrier. Rattlesnakes use their iconic rattle to warn predators like coyotes and bison to stay away or risk getting bitten. This rattling behavior evolved from ancestral tail shaking as a form of aposematic signaling. Rather than using the rattle to attract mates, the sound serves as a warning signal of the danger posed by the snake's venomous fangs. Hey, thanks for the warning. The rattling noise is created by loosely attached hollow segments of dead skin at the end of the snake's tail that click together. Recent research has shown that rattlesnakes adjust the speed of their rattling based on the proximity of a predator, creating a clever auditory illusion to deter potential threats. This sophisticated use of sound helps rattlesnakes defend themselves despite their own inability to hear the rattle. Now, scallops have a unique appearance, resembling horror movie clams with tendrils and eyes inside their mouths, despite, being delicious. Scientists have discovered that these eyes, which look like berries, could be compared to advanced telescopes. They're like tiled mirrors, capable of creating complex images similar to those formed by modern observatory telescopes. Interestingly, scallops do not have a brain, yet their eyes can form blurry images of objects. Unlike other mollusks, such as mussels, scallops have a unique eye structure similar to insects. This may explain why scallops are among the few bivalves that can swim. The numerous eyes on a scallop may help in creating a 3D view of its surroundings, with some eyes having better vision than others. These unique eyes could potentially influence the design of future telescopes, inspiring the creation of compact, wide-field imaging devices. So, the next time you enjoy a scallop dish, remember that these creatures have up to 200 tiny telescopes looking back at you. What is the purpose of hollow bones in birds? Well, birds possess unique skeletal adaptations crucial for being able to fly. One of these is hollow bones. Also known as pneumocized bones, they contain air spaces that aid in oxygen intake during flight. Air sacs are connected to these hollow areas within a bird's bones, allowing their lungs to extend throughout their skeletal structure. This intricate system helps birds absorb oxygen while breathing in and out, ultimately increasing oxygen levels in their blood and providing them with the necessary energy for flying. So, contrary to popular belief, hollow bones do not necessarily make a bird lighter. Studies show that bird bones are actually heavier compared to those animals of a similar size. In fact, the skeleton of a 2-ounce bird is denser and heavier than that of a 2-ounce mouse. This increased density results in stiffer and stronger thin hollow bones that are less likely to break. Sometimes legs are a lie. Tell me more. In a recent study, researchers delved into how caterpillars grow their signature chubby legs. They actually serve an important purpose. Caterpillars need to eat a lot to grow quickly, so having chubby legs help them move around leaves and stems efficiently. Interestingly, these chubby legs aren't actually legs at all. They're called prolegs, short nubs that help caterpillars move. The caterpillar's real legs, which turn into its adult legs as a moth or a butterfly, are near its head and are not used for walking. Even if a caterpillar loses its real legs, it can still move using its fake ones. This raises the question of what makes a leg a leg. Is it about its structure or its function? Caterpillars' unique legs are just one example of the fascinating adaptations seen in arthropods. These temporary legs help caterpillars feed and move before they transform into their final form. This fleeting glimpse into the caterpillar's world reminds us of the transitory nature of life and encourages us to appreciate these special legs while they last. These bearded dragons are cool lizards from Australia that hang out in deserts, savannas, scrublands, and subtropical forests. They're known for being real chill pets thanks to their friendly vibes, constant smile, and laid-back attitude. People love keeping them as pets, calling them beardies because of the spiky stuff on their necks. There are 8 kinds of bearded dragons, with lots of different colors and patterns developed in captivity. Even though they're doing well in their Australian homes, some of these dragons have ended up in other parts of the world through sneaky means. Though they mostly stick to the ground in the wild, they can sure climb trees when they need to show off or escape from something real spooky. Bearded dragons are now all over the world except Hawaii because they're not allowed there. Fun fact, these dragons can regrow teeth just like sharks and geckos. Some bearded dragons have been seen slurping up rainwater when it's super hot and dry outside. Bearded dragons have some quirky sleeping habits, snoozing in weird positions even when they're in their comfy tanks. They can literally stand while sleeping. They can also run pretty fast as humans. Still, they prefer taking it easy most of the time. When they do need to make a dash, they can stand up on 2 legs and zoom like a human. Mother Nature does not always adhere to strict definitions of gender. Some species have the ability to develop and maintain both male and female reproductive organs simultaneously. That's a trick. Others have the capability to switch from one gender to another, depending on various factors such as environmental conditions. These changes can provide reproductive flexibility, or may be triggered by external factors such as rising global temperatures. Clownfish are an example of sequential hermaphrodites, born as one gender but able to transition to the opposite gender if needed. In the case of clownfish, this transformation occurs from male to female, a process known as protantric. In a group of clownfish, only 2 members are fully mature, a large male and an even larger female. If something happens to the female, the male will transform into a female and select the next biggest male in the group as the new partner. Isn't that convenient? Hawkfish are another example of a species that can change gender based on specific conditions. They start off as females and can transition to males, a process known as protogeny. Unlike other sequential hermaphrodites, hawkfish have the ability to switch back and forth between male and female, depending on circumstances within the group. Banana slugs, for example, are simultaneous hermaphrodites, able to use both male and female reproductive organs at the same time. While they can self-fertilize, most banana slugs prefer to mate with another slug. Also, research has shown that some frog species are capable of changing gender, with individuals developing fully functional reproductive organs of the opposite gender. This change, observed in both laboratory and wild studies, may be a natural occurrence in frog populations, rather than solely a response to environmental changes. So now you know.
Life on a high-oxygen planet would be a wild and crazy ride. Imagine taking a deep breath and feeling like you just downed a shot of espresso. The sky is a deep shade of blue, and the trees around you are gigantic, lush and green, growing at a rapid pace. Daily exercise now becomes a breeze. With all that extra oxygen, you'd be able to run faster, jump higher, and lift heavier weights. Your morning run is basically effortless, and you notice that everything seems to move faster and with more energy. But you'd also have to watch out for the wildlife. The animals around you would be simply huge, and they'd move with a heightened speed and agility. Imagine getting chased by a cheetah that's hopped up on oxygen. It'd be like running from a Ferrari with legs. But how is this even possible? And how would high levels of oxygen affect the evolution of the planet and our life in general? To answer this question, you need to understand how oxygen works. Oxygen is like the fuel that powers the engines of life. It's a gas that's all around us, making up about 21% of the air we breathe. And don't let that small percentage fool you. Every time you take a breath, these little molecules get top priority access to your body's cells and help them produce energy. Without oxygen, your cells wouldn't have the energy they need to function properly, and your body would start to shut down. Oxygen is also incredibly versatile. It's used by a wide range of organisms, from tiny bacteria to massive elephants. It's even in the ocean. Marine organisms like plankton and algae produce a ton of oxygen, keeping the underwater world thriving. And not only is it a crucial component of life on Earth, it's also a fountain of youth. Oxygen keeps our skin glowing and our minds sharp. So don't forget to walk in the fresh air more often. But that's just the beginning. Oxygen is quite a multitasker, doing a bunch of different jobs at once. For starters, it's like the janitor of the atmosphere, cleaning up all the nasty pollutants and keeping the air fresh and clean. It's also the bodyguard of our atmosphere, protecting us from harmful UV rays and other dangerous cosmic stuff. Without it, we'd be like sitting ducks in the face of space radiation. And let's not forget about the impact of oxygen on the weather. It's like the puppet master, pulling the strings of the atmosphere and creating all sorts of wacky weather patterns. Tornadoes, hurricanes, thunderstorms, they're all just a product of oxygen doing its thing. And sure, these things are incredibly dangerous, but they also help redistribute nutrients and organic matter by lifting and transporting soil, leaves, and other debris to new areas. So they low-key help fertilize soil and provide nutrients for plants and other organisms. As you can see, the little oxygen molecules are working hard to keep everything in check. So what would happen if we suddenly raise the levels up to 30, 40, even 50%? Actually, too much oxygen can become very dangerous for us. There's such a thing called oxygen toxicity. It can lead to a range of pretty bad symptoms and even the worst of outcomes. It's like eating too much candy. It might taste good at first, but you'll regret it later. It may sound surprising, but if you get too much oxygen, you'll be out of breath. You might feel great at first, but pretty soon you'll start feeling dizzy, like you've been dancing for hours without taking a break. Also, high oxygen levels can be downright toxic to your body. It can leave you feeling like you got hit by a truck. In fact, something similar happened on Earth many years ago. For example, this kind of environment existed during the Carboniferous period, when plants first began to take root on land. At that time, oxygen made up 20% of the atmosphere, about the same as today. It continued to rise over the next 50 million years, reaching levels as high as 35%. It had some pretty profound effects on the planet. Around 300 million years ago, massive forests sprang up on land and huge swamps dominated low-lying areas. But as these giant plants decayed, something strange happened. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere suddenly dropped. Normally, when something decays, microbes break it down and create carbon dioxide. This gas helps us to trap the sun's heat and makes the planet warmer. But when these giant plants were buried under the deep swamps, microbes couldn't do their magic. All this made our planet much cooler, in a temperature sense. Who knew that something as simple as a breath of fresh air could have such a big impact? But this period of life on Earth helped us understand what our planet would look like if the oxygen level on it was much higher. And here's what we learned. We've already talked about the initial boost of energy and the exhaustion that follows. So we might need to wear special masks or equipment to help us breathe comfortably. Such an environment could also help you heal faster. It's like having a team of tiny doctors inside your body. But the downside is that it could also make you more susceptible to certain diseases and illnesses. So we're maintaining a balance then, I guess. And with all that oxygen, we'd have some pretty spectacular sunsets and sunrises to enjoy. The extra oxygen in the atmosphere would scatter light in new and interesting ways, creating breathtaking displays of color in the sky. And it's not just humans that would be affected. Plants and animals can also experience some wacky effects. Plants might grow like they're on steroids, reaching towering heights, like the beanstalk from that fairy tale. Imagine how much food we'd be able to harvest. Giant trees and crops could provide us with more sustenance than we've ever had. And animals might experience some crazy mutations. The oxygen-loving species, like insects and arachnids, would be the winners of this situation. They would simply thrive in such a world, growing bigger and stronger than ever before. So if you've ever been terrified of a giant spider that you found in the house, just imagine what it would be like if it were 5 times bigger. But for species that have adapted to lower oxygen levels, things don't look that great. Mammals, for example, would have a pretty tough time. This could lead to a shift in the balance of power among different species, with some thriving and others struggling to survive. Overall, we could see some seriously cool adaptations, like birds developing the ability to fly higher than ever before. Dealing with huge animals could be both exciting and challenging. We'd probably have to build stronger shelters and try to stay out of their way. All this could also lead to increased natural disasters, as well as damage to ecosystems and wildlife. Fires would ignite quickly and burn fiercely, making wildfires a constant threat. Even a simple spark from a campfire could potentially lead to disaster. We might need to rethink our cooking and heating methods to avoid any accidents. By the way, if we lived on a planet with less oxygen, say about 15%, we would also have a hard time. For example, our bodies would have to work much harder to obtain the same amount of oxygen as they do on Earth. We would probably experience fatigue and shortness of breath much more quickly, and physical exercise would be much more challenging. We could have some problems with memory and concentration. So the amount of oxygen we have now is the most ideal. Let's appreciate it. As you can see, living on such a planet would be a real roller coaster. It would require some serious caution. But as long as we were careful, we'd be able to enjoy the benefits of all that extra oxygen in the air. Just be prepared for some wild and wacky effects along the way.
Around 80% of all animals on Earth are insects. But how well do you know their world? Let's see if you can guess whether these amazing facts are myths or true. Here's the first one. Cockroaches can run on 2 legs, just like humans. Myth or true? That's correct. Cockroaches don't do it just for fun. Running on 2 legs is more energy efficient because it's easier for their little brains to process. If you take a closer look at the cockroach, you're gonna spot that all pairs of legs have different lengths. This creates unnecessary drag when the cockroach needs to reach high speeds. Their nervous system can get overloaded and confused by trying to control all 3 pairs of legs. So it chooses to move just 1 pair, the rear legs that use energy most efficiently. Check this out. A full moon makes mosquitoes bite 500% more actively. Myth or true? True. Just like werewolves, mosquitoes get fierce when the moon is full. That's because they use visual cues and receptors to spot their next dinner, and it's way easier to do so when the moon is full. Mosquitoes spot movement by detecting infrared radiation emitted by warm bodies at distances of up to 115 feet. Salt marsh mosquitoes took this to the next level. They're such gourmets that they can travel up to 40 miles just for the sake of eating. Only male mosquitoes bite. Does it sound real? Nope. In fact, only female mosquitoes do bite people or animals because they need a blood meal to produce eggs. On average, they take in about 5 millionths of a liter during one feeding. Meanwhile, male mosquitoes prefer eating plant juices, such as nectar. It's enough for them to get the necessary sugar and boost their energy levels. And since males don't bite, they cannot transmit diseases. But females, on the other hand, can get infected with germs when they bite sick people or animals. Here's the next fact. Alligator ticks are called so because they can reach the size of a crocodile. True or false? That's false, but still, it's the largest aquatic insect on Earth. According to Guinness World Records, toe biter, or sometimes called an alligator tick, can grow to be more than 4 inches long, which is basically the size of an average leaf. They can be found around the world, but they're especially common in North America. Toe biters perfectly blend into the landscape because their dark brown body mimics the leaves of the wetlands. They're predatory by nature. Usually they eat small tadpoles and other insects, but sometimes they take down bigger prey, like snakes and even turtles. Those who experienced meeting these creatures claim that their bites are the most painful injuries a human can suffer. Flies can poison your food just by landing on it. Myth or true? Unfortunately, that's true. Not only are flies annoying, but they also regurgitate some of their stomach contents when they land on your food. And houseflies are just one of many fly species that do so. Ugh! It happens because flies don't have teeth. Instead of chewing, they use their straw-shaped mouth to slurp their food. They secrete digestive juices on their future meal as they land on it, and once the food has been liquefied, the flies are able to slurp it up. But the real danger lies with their feet, not their mouths. Flies spend a lot of time walking on all sorts of dirty things, which can be sources of disease. Studies have revealed that flies can transfer bacteria even if they're only in contact with an area for a short period of time. So, if you ever spot some flies hanging around your food, it makes sense to cover it. Or, if you're concerned about your health, even forget about finishing your meal. Here comes the next fact. Females of toe biters carry their eggs on their backs. That's false. In fact, they lay eggs on their males' backs. After that, the future father carries the eggs as a backpack wherever he goes. As sweet as it sounds, this sight is still pretty disgusting, and it might send shivers down your spine. And more bad news. Even though they're called water bugs, they can fly. So don't just watch out below because they can approach from the sky. Ugh. Next fact. Ants are one of the most dominant animals on the planet. True or myth? True. Collectively, ants alone contribute up to 20% of the entire animal biomass on the planet. These creatures are pretty ancient. They appeared around 160 million years ago and took over a wide variety of ecological niches. As a result, today they count about 16,000 different species with over 10,000 trillion individuals. Check this out. Butterflies taste with their feet. Myth or true? Sounds like fiction, but it's true. Butterflies have taste receptors on their feet to help them find their host plants and select food. Female butterflies land on various plants and drum the leaves with their feet. This technique helps them squeeze juices from the plant. Their legs have spines with receptors, helping them to detect the right match of chemicals in the plant juice. And once a female butterfly finds the proper plant, she lays eggs. Also, both male and female butterflies step on their potential food to sense the content of dissolved sugars. Just imagine what human restaurants would look like if people were tasting with their feet. Next fact: butterfly wings are transparent. Does it sound real? That's true. Butterflies have the image of colorful and vibrant creatures. But strangely enough, their wings are transparent. They are covered with thousands of tiny scales, and these scales reflect light in different colors. But underneath all of those scales, a butterfly wing consists of several layers of chitin. It's the same protein that makes up an insect's exoskeleton. These layers are so thin that you can see right through them. Butterflies only live from 2 to 4 short weeks, and you can determine their age by the quality of their wings. With age, the scales begin to fall off the wings, leaving transparent spots. Fruit flies were the first living creatures to be sent into space. Myth or true? True! A long time before sending dogs or humans into space, scientists studied fruit flies' reactions to radiation and space flights. This helped to predict how space conditions and zero gravity might influence human beings, because we share many genes with fruit flies. And after several decades of research, on February 20th, 1947, fruit flies became the first living organism to go to space and return. Next fact: caterpillars have 2 eyes. Myth or true? That's a myth. In fact, the majority of caterpillars have 12 eyes called stemmata. If you look closely, you can see 6 tiny eyelets on each side of the caterpillar's head. One pair of eyes is usually placed closer to the antennae. It's easy to believe that 12 eyes would guarantee excellent eyesight, but that's not the case. A caterpillar uses them to distinguish light and dark and navigate its way. That's why sometimes caterpillars move their heads from side to side. Maybe they just love rap music. But scientists believe that it helps caterpillars understand the distance between objects. A few species of caterpillars have between 10 and 14 eyes, but these are usually more primitive forms, which also have several features making them different from other moths and butterflies. Scorpions can breathe underwater. Myth or true? That's false. Although scorpions are not very good swimmers, they can still store oxygen to survive underwater. And some species can hold their breath for up to 6 days. Scorpions can survive underwater thanks to the so-called book lungs, which actually look like a book. The pages of that book act like membranes that store oxygen. Since scorpions don't waste a lot of oxygen on dry land, they can just store the rest in their lungs. And once a scorpion enters the water, it has around 48 hours to hang out carefree. After that, it will need to come out of the water for the next inhale. And this cute little creature is called the northern pseudoscorpion. It's the breath-holding champion among scorpions. It can hold its breath for up to 17 days. Let's just hope it doesn't learn to fly.
You turn on the faucet in the kitchen sink when suddenly you hear a loud creak from below. Alarmed, you quickly turn off the water, but the creak repeats, this time from somewhere to your left. You tiptoe to the door, careful not to make a sound, when the entire house starts shaking and groaning. Terrified, you run outside, and just as you turn around in your front yard, you see your lovely home fall apart. You walk to the pile of debris that used to be your house and inspect it to find out what could have happened. And then you see it, a giant swarm of insects flying over the crumbling remains. And you remember, you've seen them in and out of your home for years, but didn't pay attention. If you had, you would have known that they were flying carpenter ants, and your house had been in danger for a long time. Carpenter ants only fly for a short period of time in late spring or early summer, when the weather conditions are good enough. It's their mating season. At this time, they fly in swarms around the house and are most visible. During the rest of the year, they behave almost like normal ants, hiding inside the holes and nooks of the house. And I say almost because they do one thing that's harmful to you. They basically eat your home from the inside. Carpenter ants, as the name implies, like wood a lot. Moist or rotting wood is their first choice. It's easier to chew through to make their tunnels. But if they encounter a good and sturdy piece of wood, they won't stop either. It'll just hold them for a bit longer. As the tunnel system grows, more ants appear from the eggs their queen lays her entire life. And after a few years, the colony consists of thousands, if not millions, of ants, while your house looks like a piece of cheese, with you none the wiser. When the flying ants appear, it's a sign that the colony has already grown to an enormous size, and your home is in grave danger. Most likely, there's a whole ant palace underneath your house, and within all its wooden parts, from walls to the roof. Just a few years more, and the structural damage will become too much, leading to disaster. So if you see swarms of flying insects inside your home, call pest control immediately. The bullet ant is the largest of all the ant species. Still, despite being the biggest, they grow to no larger than the size of a penny. The bullet ant is most likely to be found in countries such as Nicaragua and Paraguay, deep within the rainforests. It might be small, but it has a big bite. The bite of a bullet ant is up to 30 times more painful than the sting of a wasp or a bee. Locals sometimes refer to the small insect as the 24-hour ant because you'll experience an entire day of discomfort after their bite. Despite the unpleasant feeling, the bite of a bullet ant isn't too dangerous and should heal within a week. These ants have a peculiar habit that might make it easy to avoid their powerful bite. Bullet ants release a strong and disgusting stench to drive away predators. So, if you ever find yourself trekking through the rainforest and smell an intensely unpleasant odor, run. There are just shy of 300 different species of fire ants all across the world. All the species have the same powerful bite. They're tiny insects who travel in large colonies and have a distinct light brown color, almost red. Fire ants are most commonly found in the United States and are attracted to food. They tend to crash a lot of picnics that they're not invited to. Fire ant bites are incredibly itchy, but not very dangerous. Running the bites under some cold water should help to soothe the itchiness, and the bite should go away in a week or so. If you have a more severe reaction than itchiness, make sure to seek urgent advice from your doctor. Now, velvet ants aren't ants at all. They're a kind of wingless wasp that just looks a lot like ants. These bugs don't form large colonies and usually live alone, hiding in tall grass. This behavior has given them another nickname, cow ants, because when a cow is grazing nearby, it might step on a velvet ant and get a painful bite in return. Humans also get bitten sometimes, especially if they walk barefoot. Velvet ants are venomous, but their venom is less potent than that of bees, so it's not really dangerous. Still, the pain from such a bite is serious, and if you want to squash this bug, good luck. They have an unusually tough carapace that protects them from other stinging insects and even birds. Termites are the scare of all things wooden, and of ants too. When ants encroach on their territory, termites go out of their notorious mounds and give back more than they receive. The insects are basically blind, but their heads are equipped with natural spitfire. They spit acid at their foes, driving them away quicker than they got there. Don't even think of getting your fingers in the way of that acidic stream. It's a really unpleasant feeling. Speaking of spitting, bombardier beetles are the best at that. The look of this bug is menacing enough itself, but when it feels threatened, it will give out a loud pop and spray the enemy with boiling hot liquid. There's a chamber inside the bug's belly that keeps two substances for that. When they mix before spraying, they react with each other and quickly get really hot. Even birds are in big trouble if they get into the beetle's way, and other insects simply have no chance against it. Tarantula hawks are long, thin insects with beautiful rust-colored wings and yellow antennae. They tend to be found in rainforests across Asia, America, and Africa. They like to live alone and make their homes by burrowing into the ground. If you ever come across a tarantula hawk, be sure to move away very slowly. These insects only attack if they sense a threat. Tarantula hawks are thought to have one of the most painful stings in the world. The pain of the tarantula hawk sting is incredibly intense and lasts for 3 to 4 minutes. After these minutes have passed, the sting won't require any urgent care and should heal on its own. The yellow jacket is a dangerous species of wasp that can be found all over the world. They're named for their distinctive yellow and black patterns. The yellow is a striking neon color, much brighter than a normal wasp. Yellow jackets live in large colonies and build their nests in trees, bushes, and even underground. If you come across a yellow jacket nest, move away slowly and be careful not to threaten or irritate the wasps. The sting of a yellow jacket definitely isn't a pleasant feeling. The Japanese hornet is the largest species of hornet in the world. The Japanese hornets have a yellow and black striped pattern, just like the yellow jacket. What makes them distinguishable from bees and wasps is their size and shape. The Japanese hornet is much larger and thinner than a bumblebee, and much longer than a wasp. These hornets, of course, live in Japan, where they travel in colonies of up to 700 members. People who have previously been stung by the Japanese hornet often say it's like being struck by a red-hot poker. If you're ever unfortunate enough to be stung by one of these insects, immediately call for help. And while you wait for the doctors, wash the sting with cold water. Asian giant hornets live mostly in Asian countries, but they were reported in North America in 2019. These beasts are big, yellow, and vicious. It's impossible to confuse a giant hornet with any other bee or wasp. They are much larger and a lot more aggressive. But the worst thing about them is their stinger, which is more than 3 times longer than that of a honeybee. The stinger contains a really potent venom, and several stings from an Asian giant hornet can bring down even a large animal, and human too. And if that wasn't enough, these creatures can even spray their venom, aiming at the eyes. Needless to say, that's an unforgettable experience. Okay, let's admit it, all centipedes are terrifying, and perhaps one of the most horrible species is a Texas red-headed centipede. First of all, it looks like it's ascended from your deepest, darkest nightmares. A black-sectioned body, dozens of yellowish legs that look more like claws, and a red head with 2 long prongs. That's a picture enough to make me run for it in a split second. Being pretty large, these crawlers have a voracious appetite, munching on toads, lizards, and an occasional rat. Sometimes, when desperate, they can even catch a bat right in the middle of a flight. And of course, red-headed centipedes are venomous, fitting for such an appearance. Luckily, they're not interested in humans, and that's mutual.